Hello everyone, Darren here, and welcome to my review for Civilized Humankind. So for a quick introduction, Humankind is a hex-based 4X game where you progress from a tiny little tribe to a sprawling civilization through 6 distinct eras on a randomly generated map. There's a technology tree, a civic tree, a build-your-own-religion type system. You found and grow cities, exploit unique resources, trade with or fight other empires, and ultimately compete for fame to become the greatest civilization in Humankind.
Though humankind's thirst for energy has no limits, the planet does. Now we can take what we need, while leaving something for the future.
Sounds familiar, right? A question a lot of people are gonna have is this better than Civilization? And as nice as it would be to give you just a straight answer to that, it's a bit more complicated. On the surface, yes, these games are obviously very similar, but it's kind of like comparing Call of Duty and Battlefield. They're both FPS games, and even when they cover the same era, they play pretty differently and people have their favorites. And that's kind of what Humankind is like to Civilization. They share a lot, but they do play differently. However, I know you want an answer, so I thought it would be helpful to at least clarify the differences as quick as possible, so here are 12 rapid-fire major differences between Humankind and Civilization. After the rapid fire, I'll go through each of these more in depth and discuss what works and what falls flat. Number 1. You don't pick a civilization at the start of the game. Everyone starts as a tribe in the Neolithic era. Each time you progress an era, you choose from one of 10 cultures to adopt. The same two cannot exist together, so it's first come, first served. Number 2. All turns in Humankind are simultaneous, meaning as you move around the map exploring, expanding, or even attacking, so do the other competitors. Number 3. The map is broken into predefined sectors called territories that never change. You can choose where you build a city and how it grows, but you own the entire territory when you build it. Later, you can attach or merge adjacent territories together. Number 4. There are no worker units or improvements on the map. All the building on the map takes place from the city itself. Number 5. You don't place population directly on hex tiles of the map. Instead, you place population into categories by dragging and dropping them to scale the benefits for their respective category. Number 6. Every era, 4 new wonders become available, and you can spend cultural influence to claim one. When claimed, nobody else can build it, and you never have to build it if you don't want to. However, if you do build it fast enough, you can actually claim another if it's still available. Number 7. Wonders can be built by multiple cities at once. It counts as a shared project. There's no limit to how many cities can combine to work on a shared project. Religious sites also act as shared projects, as well as various space race buildings. Number 8. Multiple units can stack within an army, up to 10 in total. Number 9. When initiating combat, a battlefield border is drawn dynamically around the armies. From here, your units can spread out of their army, and you fight 3 battle turns within 1 campaign turn. If at the end of those 3 battle turns you hold the enemy camp, you force the enemy to retreat. Number 10. Diplomacy works by asking for cooperation on certain things, but if refused, you earn war support. After you gain 80 war support, you can wage war, and it's up to you to then win before your support drains to 0. The attacker always loses a little bit of war support each turn, so you need to actively win battles to keep the support up and lower the defenders. If either side's war support drops to 0, then they can be forced to surrender and hand over settlements or money. Number 11. There's a society and ideology system that pivots when events appear or when you sign civics. Keeping a balanced approach raises your city's stability, but leaning to the left or right of these categories can give you global buffs. Other nations also treat you better if your ideologies line up. Number 12. Progression to the next era is based on fame. You earn fame by reaching milestones across 7 categories such as growth, industry, science, and so on. But you can also do one-time things like be the first to circumnavigate the world or develop the writing technology. You'll need fame in at least 3 categories to progress an era. And that's it for the major differences between the 2 games. So let's talk about them a little bit more in depth. So picking a civilization, each era there are 10 unique cultures to pick from, and there are 6 eras. Each culture has 1 unique modifier, 1 unique district, and 1 unique unit. They also fall under a theme, like expansionist, industrialist, or scientist, and that sort of determines your focus for that era. When you adopt a new culture, all the building models will change to reflect who you are now. In terms of gameplay, you keep the unique modifier, and you keep any of the buildings that you already built, but you'll lose the ability to build the old unique building, and the old unique unit will eventually just become outdated. The big disconnect here is that you're not really building your own culture, as they sort of advertise. Instead, you're just swapping cultures and keeping one or two things. There are no prerequisites to the culture that you take on, so for instance, you can, in this order, go from being Chinese to Roman, to Japanese to British to being Soviet. It is quite literally cultural appropriation. One viewer on my Twitch stream noticed that when Makeda, an AI persona in my game, became Celtic, that it's okay. She identifies as Celtic now, and it literally does feel like that. You just choose whatever you want, regardless of historical pretext or even anything gameplay related.
So these are the renowned Celts. Whether or not their soldiers are naked, they are armed and dangerous.
Life is wonderful, is it not? Treat me and my people with respect, and all will be well.
I was hoping that you could actually build a culture that was your own, based on climate, ethics, ideology, maybe proximity to others, but just imagine civilization where you swap your civ every 50 turns or so. Now, looking past the weirdness of this system, gameplay-wise, it's actually pretty fun, as there are a lot of cultures, which does make the game feel like it has a lot of content. I mean, it does have 60 unique units and 60 unique buildings on top of all the standard stuff. And they are pretty impactful. The modifiers maybe aren't as impactful as they make them out to be, but the buildings do stay on the map, so if you really make the most of your era, you'll feel the effects of your old culture for a long time to come, just because you built a lot of that stuff that they had. As an example, I chose the British in the industrial era, as I had just gotten myself a vassal, and the British's unique building is a colonial office, which can only be built in your vassal's territory, so that's quite different even on of itself. It earns both you and them money, and my vassals had 6 territories, so I built it 6 times, and it generated about 110 gold, and it meant that my vassal's tribute was bigger as well, because they were earning more. And that lasted for the rest of the game, so it is cool being able to shift your focus during eras and pick up distinct playstyles along the way. I just think that thematically, it's really weird, and it's confusing when you're fighting against the Japanese, and during the war, they become the Mexicans. Their units will stay the same during the fight, so now you're fighting samurai, but it's gonna say that they're Mexico. So that's the culture swapping mechanic. For some, it's a deal breaker straight away. For others, it's just a cool way to shake up the gameplay. For me, I think you could have achieved the same gameplay without the distracting change of theme. And I would have liked to see a system that required you to do something in order to pick a culture. I mean, if you want to be Roman, maybe you should have had to expand a certain amount. Right now, you could be Carthaginian, whose unique building is a Cothan harbor. You could be them and never even see the ocean. You could be totally landlocked and still become Carthaginian. It's just a bit weird thematically.
There's just no way to make this work. I do not accept.
Anyways, moving on. The next thing was that turns are actually simultaneous. Now this was something I didn't even notice for a while, but I eventually grew to dislike it. Big surprise, eh? The main thing is that it feels like an unfair advantage to the AI. As the turn starts, you kind of want to assess what's changed, see what's going on, and all you'll see is a bunch of AI armies all moving simultaneously together into your lands within the first few seconds. I mean, there is no way as a human that you can do that. In Civilization, there's a rule set for multiplayer that says if you're at war, take turns separately, but if you're at peace, you go at the same time, and I think that would suit the game way better personally. Now, APM isn't really something I associate with a 4X board game, and that's something you're gonna feel. You'll feel that pressure, especially during wartime, where you're trying to look around your border, see everything that's moving, and see what's happening. Now, it's not that big of a deal. Like I say, during peacetime, you won't even notice, but I guarantee you're gonna get caught out a few times, as I did, where an army attacks you before you attack it, they get the first advantage, or what's worse, is when a single unit just runs up to your army and they lock it down because of zone of control. Then, you attack it and it retreats, running like 6 or 7 tiles often into your territory, but because you're the one that clicked attack, you lose half your movement and you can't catch them, or you can't just progress into their territory as you were planning. It feels like a big exploit to just send a little shit unit out, stand next to you, and prevent you from moving, basically. As well as that, in diplomacy, because it's both of your turns, they just constantly spam you back with deal requests, and every time you say no, they gain war support. And this is actually kind of broken. They definitely need a cooldown for asking for the same thing twice in the same turn at the very least. I haven't played multiplayer, but why wouldn't you just say, hey, give me this town, and then they say no, and you say, hey, give me this town, and then they say no, and every time that happens, you just build up war support. There's no repercussion for getting rejected or declined. In fact, you get all the advantage when you get declined. Next up to talk about, we have the territories, the workers, and the population. For territories, I actually quite enjoyed this sector-style gameplay of building an outpost which claims this big territory. Then after several turns you can develop it into a city if you want. I was worried sectors would feel very constrained or give you less freedom, but I didn't feel that way to me at all. And it's nice, in a way, to not have competing cities just built right on top of each other. Although that can happen if you're like both building on the border of a territory. You also have this soft city cap limit, so early on you're going to want to create a bunch of outposts, but they're much more vulnerable to raids and attacks, and as you build up your influence, you can then attach territories together, and it combines the population and everything into one, which feels really like nice natural progression, and if things change, you can always separate them again. Building in Humankind is predominantly based on districts. Almost every building you place on the map is a district of some sort, and almost all of them need to be adjacent to another district in order to be built. So because of this, the building feels really organic, and over time your cities just kind of build outwards from themselves. The only exception to this are things like harbors or military buildings or something that's going to be exploiting a resource, but they don't count as districts, so you can't build off of them. Other than that, once you build something on the map, that's basically it, and any further improvements are just then added through the building menu called infrastructures. So an infrastructure, for instance, might make it so that food on rivers is increased. Personally, I really like not having to micromanage workers, and I much prefer this system of building improvements from the city itself. It also just has the benefit of decluttering the map. All you have to manage on the map is the placement of buildings and the movement of armies. That's it. The building system is also quite straightforward, but I feel like it does give you a lot of depth across the 4 disciplines. You're free to move your population to whatever category you want to boost that category, and each new district you build or territory you attach will lower the overall city stability. Now, the lower stability, the more negative events you're going to get, as well as less control you have to build things. And eventually the city might secede from your empire in a sort of rebellion. Now, to combat this, you need to invest in stability infrastructures, improve your culture and faith, and even station garrison armies. There's a bunch of different ways to raise it, so I feel like there's a decent amount of depth in there. Next, we're going to have a look at combat. This is by far the most innovative addition to a game like Civilization that we've seen in a while. Essentially, units can combine into armies, and the armies can get bigger with technologies and civics over time. When 2 armies meet, a battle border is drawn on the map where you deploy all your units and fight turn-based battles within the grander turns of the campaign. The battle turns are called rounds, and there's 3 rounds per game turn, and if at the end of 3 rounds you've taken the enemy camp, the enemy army will rout, or you can just fight to kill all of the units, which is what usually happens. Now, when the battle ends, the units return to their original positions instantly. It's a really great idea, and it allows combat and battles to make use of much more of the map than you otherwise would, and all of the different height differentials, while also keeping the map decluttered when battles aren't happening. Because of the round-based nature of the battles, if 3 rounds go by and there's no winner, a regular turn will happen on the campaign, and you can actually bring in more units to the fight and call them in as reinforcements. All they have to do is just enter the battle zone. When it comes to fighting in settlements, you start a siege, and you can actually wait the enemy out as they take attrition and you build siege equipment right there on site, or you can just assault it outright. Walls can be crossed by infantry only, but the defenders behind the wall tile get a large defensive bonus. Artillery that you build is then used to break the walls down and allow cavalry to come in, and later on in the game, with gunpowder, you will make your own units to attack walls before the battle and can smash them without having to wait for the equipment to be built. So again, even sieges feel like they have that nice progression through technologies with them as well. I really like the combat in this game. I think it's great, and I think it's actually the biggest selling point for me overall. However, there's always a but. The big drawback is that it can at times be buggy. Numerous times I had battles glitch out and require a reload, or units would ignore impassable cliffs or ignore zone of control. It can be quite frustrating when that happens. Another big issue is AI. While they're fine when they're actually fighting the battles, they actually make pretty good choices, everything's fine there. Overall, I waged 2 or 3 big wars against the biggest player in the game, and they never defended their cities after the medieval era. Now, for some reason, before the medieval era, players seemed to garrison units much more. I had some really great battles, but afterwards, cities were ghost towns for me, and really kind of ruined the end of the game, as I was able to just take 7 cities with not one army defending them. That's a real big fucking problem. They get default garrisons, so it's not total pushover, you know, you can build up your fortification strength, but the units inside are generally quite weak, so it really was quite anticlimactic. Now eventually I just started dropping nukes for fun, to see, as you do, to see what would it prompt any more aggressive response from the other AI, but no, nobody cared. So again, kind of disappointing, anticlimactic really. Next is diplomacy. The overall idea for this system is great, building up grievances, which creates war support, and then using that to declare war and then winning battles to force the other to concede. Love it, love the idea of it. However, I constantly had issues with it. In my game, I had the orange player attack me in a war. Right, so I want everyone to follow along. This can get kind of complicated, so I'll repeat that. I had the orange player attack me in a war. They rushed 4 outposts at once on the borders, outposts that were attached to my cities, and they sacked them, which takes 2 or 3 turns to do. Then, to my surprise, they actually took them over and attached them to their own cities. I didn't even know you could do that. I assume it's because they were outposts. With cities, if you occupy them, you actually can't do anything to them. It gets decided at the end what happens. But outposts, I lost them in the war and they built them up in the same spot, or they just took them over. Very weird. Now, fair play to the AI, they were fast and they sent armies at me very unexpectedly. And they did all of this in about 10 turns, very fast, very efficient, no complaints there. I reacted by sending my armies up to meet them and I won every battle where we actually fight. This drives their war support down. I then start taking the outposts back, but to do so I have to sack them now. It takes 3 or 4 turns and I get my old outpost back. Because I defeated them, though, in so many battles, they hit 0 war support, which meant I had to end the war because I've won, and I can't end the turn until I do. Then, in the war deals, I have to ask for my own stuff back, and that's all I was able to get. Now sure, I was rushed at the beginning, but I didn't want to end the war, and if it had just gone on a few more turns more, I would have got all 4 of my outposts back, and then I would have been able to ask them for money or cities of their own. Now surely, when a nation loses a war, you don't negotiate to take back what they took from you during the war. That'd be kind of like, I don't know, Germany in World War II and debating whether or not the Allies can have France back. I mean, you kind of take it as read that the starting scenario is returned and then pile on reparations on top of that. So to me, that's a very frustrating system because it means that I shouldn't have fought the battles on purpose to prolong the war and get my outposts back. Which I could have done. I could have just went straight for the outposts and ignored armies. Is that what I'm supposed to do? I mean, that certainly would have been a better outcome. Here's what's even worse. During the war with the orange player, the pink player to my south waged their war on me. Several turns later, the orange and the pink allied each other. Makes sense? They have a common goal. They're both at war with me. After I ended the war with the orange player, the very next turn, they raised a grievance with me, said, "Hey, you're at war with our ally, so we demand that you surrender to them." And I said, well, no, first off, I'm winning my war with them as well, and secondly, I just beat you, so get fucked. Declining their request gave them 50 war support and triggered a new war with them. I didn't gain any support, and I was near 0 already because we had just fought, where I won, by the way, and both times I'm the defender here. So it's just all messed up. It's a really nice idea, but there's a lot of use cases where things just don't make sense. I had an ally, and when I went to war, they declined to join it. Twice. But they're still my ally. Things like that really bother me. So I really hope they improve this system and allow for combined war goals and maybe some cooldowns of a few turns for how often you can wage wars. So at this point in the video, you can probably see a pattern forming. I actually like the game. It has cool ideas, but it's fairly buggy, it's not very well balanced, and there's just several use cases where scenarios aren't making any sense. There's units where their upgrade stats actually get worse and their payment will increase. This meant I just kept my elephants for like 2 eras more than I needed because it said they were going to get weaker. The eras feel very fast generally, especially the last 2 eras. You get all this cool technology, but you barely have any time to use it. Now, there are different settings at the start of the game, so you could prolong it, in fairness, but I just played on the default kind of settings for this review. While there are many avenues to victory, really, science is just the one that dominates the game. So I think religion and culture need a buff with how they can convert and potentially steal cities from someone focusing science. Here's the graph of my victory screen after my game. Only in the last era did I focus science, and look what happened. The AI seem ultra aggressive, even on relatively normal difficulty. I was on Nation, which is like kind of a middle high difficulty, and they churn out units at a huge rate. Now, when I took their towns, I saw that their populations couldn't actually be sustained from what they built. It seems that they had about double the population that I could have. So clearly AI is a big issue. Now, I'm actually okay with AI getting some cheats, but I mean, there's degrees of acceptability, I think, and like on a normal-ish difficulty, them getting double what you get seems a little egregious. I can't imagine what they must get at the highest level. So my personal recommendation for this game is to get it on Xbox Game Pass if you're interested, which is where I played it, and wait until maybe a winter sale, you know, coming up in a few months. I'm sure the game will have a patch and maybe a discount if you want to invest further into it, maybe even a DLC. It does have crossplay, though some friends of mine had issues just starting a game online at all from Xbox Game Pass, but I was able to just fine. To end on a bit more of a positive note, I didn't really give it its due. I will say I love the art direction of the game. While it is kind of cartoony-ish, it has great detail and texture. It's not just flat, Fortnite-y, generic kind of cartoon. It's really nice. It's like a kind of a it's like a painting, a moving painting, like almost all the time. It looks really, really nice. It sounds like a throwaway just adding it here at the end, but the art direction really is something that makes it just fun to exist in the world, and it makes it very enjoyable to play, despite the other issues I mentioned. The same goes for the UI. I really, really like the cleanness of the UI. I mean, Amplitude are kind of known for this. I think Endless Spaces UI is gorgeous as well. These sort of transparent windows, very minimalistic tooltips and stuff that really just give you the detail that you need. It looks really, really good. So props when it comes to the UI, and actually all the buildings have really, really nice artwork. So much so that I actually couldn't really even fit it all on screen, which is a bit of a shame. It's kind of just thrown into this like really long menu, but I'm glad it's there. It looks really nice. So is Humankind better than Civilization? Probably not. But I think it definitely introduces great new ideas to the genre, and it introduces some more competition. You know, I wouldn't mind if another Total War game came along that even wasn't as good, but if it had new ideas, at least you would get Creative Assembly to think about what they're doing. Ultimately, this game has great ideas, but it's certainly just not as polished as Civilization. Yet. Maybe it will be. So I'd just wait for a while to see how the game gets patched, tweaked, and if it gets additional content, because I think there is actually a lot they can do with the game to expand it further. Anyways, that's it for my review. Let me know what you think of the game, the culture system, how you swap cultures, how you tag swap, if you'll be picking it up or if you've played it already. And if you want to see more from me with this game, just give the video a like, and if it does well, I'll cover future updates and any new content it gets. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
The question: how far will you push humankind?
Hey guys, thank you very much for watching, and remember, if you want to support this series directly, you can click the join button to become a channel member. Doing so will get your name in the credits, as well as loyalty badges and emotes to use in the comments. If you don't see the join button, it means the video is being copyright claimed, but you can still join from the channel page on desktop. You can also link your account to our Discord to get a special role on there that'll give you access to the Senate House and a few other perks.